never did get that.
Good morning, Bucketeers. Welcome to the Bucket Courses. I'm Joanne Bungie, and I'm here to remind you to turn off your cell phones and turn on your G-Coil. We appreciate you coming out this morning on a busy holiday season Wednesday morning. You old-timers know that we usually don't have classes past Thanksgiving because it is such a busy time of the year. But we have an opportunity to have a makeup class from Dan Weeks. You remember that earlier this fall, Dan did he did 3 classes of the 4-class course that he had on creativity, and he wasn't able to do one of the classes. Many of you asked, is Dan going to give us the 4th class? And I'm happy to say that he is. And we had to put it into this busy season to do it, but I'm sure you don't mind, obviously. You're here. So it's a delight to welcome back Dan. As you remember, he is a writer, photographer, and editor of the beautiful Island Magazine. So welcome back again, Dan Weeks, and Creativity, a Lifelong Journey. Dan.
Well, we're into overtime, so this better be good. Since it's been so long, I thought I would review really quickly some of the things, and perhaps for some of you who weren't able to be at all the classes, to just go over quickly some of the things that we'd seen and heard from folks during the past 3 sessions. The first session, Late in Life Passion. Who remembers Carl Schrag? What did we learn from Carl Schrag? Does anybody have any memory of some of the things that...
Life comes first.
Life comes before the art, that's right. And there he is. Anything else that he taught us? And I know it's been a very long time. One of those things was that the viewer, to some degree, must become the painter. He said he likes to paint things that are either very dark or very light, but you can't really determine exactly what the content is in all of the image. So the viewer has to sort of fill in some of the details from their own experience and their own imagination. He also taught us that style comes by itself, like handwriting, and that no matter how different, he worked in many different media and with many different subjects, but he said everybody seems to recognize my work immediately as mine. And we also looked at the work of a couple other people, Jerry Stelmach, who makes handmade canoes, to patterns that were drawn much earlier by E.M. White, and many other folks make E.M. White canoes as well. And Jerry says, all of our canoes, we all know one another, and all of our canoes are pretty consistent internally, but from one to the other, the same pattern will produce a canoe that looks different, feels different, and handles a little bit differently. It seems to be the inevitable thumbprint of the maker. And we also looked at Rob Revere, who's a forte piano maker, makes antique-style forte pianos of the kind that Mozart would have played. And again, there are only very few people in the world who make these, and Rod can tell over the radio, no less, whose piano is being played. Even if they don't say it differently, because they all sound a little bit different, and you can tell the signature of the maker. So one of the things we came to the conclusion of in that first class was that we can't help but be creative. We can't help, no matter what we do, by leaving our stamp on things, even when we're trying not to. It seems to be just an inevitable result of individual human activity. The second class was called Ordinary People. Does anybody remember this guy? His name is, I will come to me in a minute. His name is Galen Carpenter, that's right, his name is Galen Carpenter, and he was the one who kind of led to an epiphany of mine when he said, we've been talking late into the night and early into the next morning, and I suddenly said, I know why I'm here. I'm learning about the creative process, but why are you staying up so late and talking to me? And he said, because I'm learning things about myself, and I'm learning things about my technique, and I'm learning things about myself as an artist that'll make me a better artist. Nobody's ever asked me these questions before. So that was very intriguing to me. And he also was the one who turned these beautiful segmented bowls. And not only did he invent the shapes and the individual appearance of these things, but he also invented the techniques for making them. Those, as you may recall, are pine cones that were soaked in epoxy and then segmented and glued back together and turned as though they were single block. And you know, nobody had ever done that before, and the only reason he did it, he said, is because I didn't realize it couldn't be done. Then we looked at Randy DeMarcado, Jamaican guy who makes beautiful reproduction Chinese furniture, and he said, you know, there are drawings of these things, but the joinery is very, very intricate. There's no fasteners at all, and he says they show you what the joints looks like, but they don't show you how to put them together. Now you have to figure out yourself. And he said he just started with the easiest part, and he just kept on going, and he said the project sort of developed a flow, and I wasn't even really thinking about it, and eventually this chair emerged. And that's something we heard from a number of other artists, that they get into this sort of flow state where they're not consciously making decisions, but things keep going. And one of them said, the tapestry artist said, you know, sometimes you have to stop and think and make a decision, but she said if you do that too much, you start second-guessing yourself, and the piece sort of loses its coherence. And so that flow state seemed to be something that a bunch of artists talked about. This is a Calla Lily letter opener. Say that 3 times fast. By silversmith Robin Williams, who sort of took the subconscious nature of production of art one step further when I asked her, why are all your pieces represent nature? She's remembered an incident early in her life where nature was sort of a life and death matter for her, and the chickens hid her from the people who were after her. And she said, boy, I'm just realizing now that nature is so fleeting and plants grow and fade so quickly that making them in silver makes them eternal and allows me to keep them with me for the rest of my life. So that was another epiphany for both of us. The next session was called Improvisation and All That Jazz, and it featured prominently this character, who was, his name was Kevin Zernick. He was my roommate freshman year at Cornell College, and is a very accomplished and creative jazz keyboard artist and composer. And I was always sort of a mediocre, middling, competent high school band trombone player, and so I asked him, Kevin, I like your music, I'd love to try and play with you, would you be willing to help me? And so we tried it, and it never worked until we had one magical improvisation section where I sort of heard myself playing music that I knew that I was completely incapable of playing. And Kevin was as astonished as I was, and he asked me after we were done, he said, Weeks, what happened? And I said, I don't know, but I retired. And we never could figure out how I had somehow managed, without any intervention on anyone's part, to become a competent jazz improviser for 15 minutes only. That is the only time in my life when I've been able to achieve that. But it raised the question: where does creativity come from? What is inspiration? How do creative people find the ability to do these things? Because I realized I've just had the experience that I've heard other artists talk about, getting into the flow, having things come out without thinking about them. And it was really quite startling and almost alarming. So I wanted to find out what the roots of these things were. So I did some reading, being a good liberal arts student, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, and this book talks a lot about the notion of quality and the notion of creativity and where do ideas come from. And one of the things that Robert Pirsig articulates pretty well is that the scientific method is very good at testing hypotheses, but it is not helpful at all in generating them. And so the question of where the creative idea comes from that you want to test is something that science really doesn't address. And we also heard from Edison and Einstein and a couple of other people who seem to agree with that. So that still left a mystery in my mind. But I'd run out of time at school, and so I ended up the next summer back in this magical landscape of the White Horse Ranch in the Sandhills of Nebraska, where I'd had my improvisation experience with Kevin, preparing the ranch for the arrival of a return of some equestrian performers who had performed there with this troupe that traveled all over the country in the 40s and 50s. And I had a bunch more inexplicable experiences. I was supposed to be sort of taking notes and recording history, but when all these people arrived, they met one another again for the first time, and they all started crying and carrying on, and I found myself just as bawling as uncontrollably as they were, and not really knowing why, because I didn't know any of these people. I wasn't there. They were nobody to me and I to them. But that continued. One of these horses, Abraham here, when he saw them, trotted up to them and sort of went into part of the equestrian act that he had not actually performed, because he was not alive when the troupe performed. And the troupe performers sort of automatically went into their routine, and then they sort of had the experience I did when I played jazz. They sort of stepped back and said, "What just happened? How could this occur?" Also, I had to lead them around on a tour of the ranch, and I suddenly found I could ride a horse, which I'd never done before, and I was terrified of horses because I think they're big and dumb and unpredictable. And then at night, around the campfire, all of these gals from the year 1952, they were all particularly good singers, and the way they entertained themselves on the show road as they went from fair to fair in the back of a school bus was to sing. And so they started singing all of the hits of 1952. You know, Detour, Tumbling Tumbleweeds, and of course, Happy Trails, you know. And then they were all crying again because, you know, until we meet again, and so on and so forth. And I found myself joining them and singing these songs that I really didn't know, and certainly didn't know the lyrics, but I found that if I really just sort of focused on them, it all worked. And I felt like I was a part of that group. And even other people, there was a guy there by the name of Igor Gamov, whose father, George Gamov, was a very famous theoretical physicist, and Igor is as well. And I walked him back to his cabin after this folk singing thing, and he said, "I don't understand this. This is unbelievable." He said, "This place is Brigadoon. It just comes to life when these people come, and we're all part of this." And he was just as baffled as I was. So I thought, well, if I'm baffled, if Igor Gamov is baffled, I'm in pretty good company. So I guess I shouldn't feel too badly about it. And that's where we left off. That's where we left off. I still didn't know where these things came from. So then I was out of college by that time, but like a good student, I still did so. I said, what can I do? Where can I find a discipline that investigates with some degree of rigor exceptional performance, like the singing and the horseback riding and the trombone playing and so on and so forth? And the only thing I could think of was, there's lots of mystical stuff written and so on, but the only thing I could think of that was an actual discipline was the then fairly new discipline of sport psychology, now called performance psychology, which attempts to analyze exceptional athletic performance and help athletes do it again. You know, if somebody's on a winning streak, you want to understand why. And there's great incentive for a world-class athlete to be able to maximize their performance. So this field of performance psychology evolved. And I started doing some reading, and I was stunned to come across, in the book, The Psychic Side of Sports, a reference to Brigadoon. And the reference was many powerful incidents of the kind that we have been talking about here that are inexplicable slip away like Brigadoon because they find no place in the experiencer's ordinary frame of reference. In other words, these kinds of things that I've experienced and that the artists had experienced and that the troopers had experienced are not, in fact, highly unusual. It's just that we don't have any way to explain them. We don't have a language for it. We don't have a frame of reference for it. So we tend to ignore them as, well, I don't know why that happened. It must have been a fluke. I don't know why I, batted 1,000. It must have been a fluke. We can't explain it. And they say, and they went on to say, they went on to say that these kinds of experiences have been reported in yogic and shamanic traditions for 3,000 years. They are real. And their advice to the athletes were, when it comes, let it happen. See what it wants to say and where it wants to take you. And then use that experience to try to replicate it. So this was very encouraging to me, and very encouraging to the art, because I was going to be interviewing artists, and encouraging to the artists that I talked to about it, that no, there's a discipline that actually tries to maximize these so-called peak experiences or peak performance things. And that these things may seem to be completely inexplicable, but they are real, they're documented, we can see them in sports statistics and in performance and in musical performance and artistic performance. And their advice was, in other words, cultivate some openness. Don't disbelieve yourself just because you've never done it before or because nobody's ever done it before. And just because you're told what you're doing can't be done. So this connected with me because, as I said, about 50% of the artists that I ended up interviewing were entirely self-taught. Were people who used ignorance to their advantage. They hadn't been schooled in what was possible and what was not possible, and so broke barriers they didn't even know exist and did things that hadn't been done before. So that left the question, if all of this is going on in the arts and in creativity, what are they for? Why do the arts exist? And I really looked for somebody who would address this question, but this is somewhat of a heretical question, particularly on the campus of a liberal arts college for someone who's graduated in the humanities, because it's self-evident what art is for. Art is for art's sake. Art is for itself. Asking what it's for brands you, as a Philistine. Or worse, someone who wants to, quantify the unquantifiable and take the mystery from art, which is the whole point. So I had to really, really look hard to find somebody who addressed this question, and I finally found him. And he is so obscure that this is the best picture of him that I could find on the internet after a 2-hour search. And he died in 2011, so it's not like he was terribly old. His name is Andrew Brink. He was a professor of English literature at the University of Toronto. And he wrote several books, probably 6 or 8 of them, but the 2 that I read were Loss and Symbolic Repair and Creativity as Repair. And part of the reason that he wasn't well known was he was a fairly diffident guy, and he was kind of interested in exploring things for their own sake, and he published a book, but he wouldn't really publicize it, and they went out of print almost as soon as they were released. And you still can't find copies of these books are extremely difficult to find. I finally tracked them down and photocopied them for my own use. He had a number of things to say about art and about our perception of it. And here's probably why he didn't get a whole lot of traction in the academic world. He said the humanities have missed the point by not asking what the arts are for, what they're supposed to do for people. As I said, art is seen as ornament, as decoration, as distraction, as entertainment in the culture, but it's not really seen as something that is necessary to the evolution of the species. But science tells us that it must be. If art and creative products occur in all cultures across all times, evolution tells us that that had to be a naturally selected behavior that not only has measurable effects on our quality of life, but makes it more likely that we will survive and that we will reproduce. So art has been selected, along with all the other traits we have, 5 fingers and opposable thumbs and everything else, as being a trait that is necessary for the survival and thriving of the human race. And he says we have done ourselves a disservice by not viewing it as such and asking what it's for. And so he had some ideas as to what it was for. He said art is a retrieval system that calls back deepest feelings to order. I'm sorry, I read that wrong. Art is a retrieval system that calls back deepest feelings to order and make sense of them, more fully than introspection can. And this of course, is Carl Schraub's image that we saw earlier. It's called the Madonna of the Subway. It was painted in 1939, shortly after he arrived and shortly before this country entered World War II. And we had suspicions that it had to do with his experience in World War I of being in a very crowded basement and his mother holding him as all these people sort of jumped through the windows to escape the horrors of war. And really that statement by Brink makes a great deal of sense. Reflecting on something is one thing, but actually taking the time to create an image of it, to painstakingly represent it somehow, whether you do it in imagery or in music or in drama or in anything else, involves a great deal more effort, and it allows you to get that experience outside of your head and put it out there where you can look at it and examine it and understand it a little better. And furthermore, it puts it out there in the community so that others can look at it and react to it. So you not only have the power of your own mind, not only working internally, you have the power of your own mind in dialogue with something that you've created, and then you have the power of all of the minds of people who see it and respond to it to try and help figure it out and decide what is valuable about it, or what you might have learned from it, or how you might adapt to it. Of course, we've lost a great deal of that closed loop. I mean, tribal societies had it. If somebody created something, everybody saw it. And art was not a separate specialized profession, and art criticism was not a separate specialized profession. So people had the benefit of others reacting to the things that they had done immediately, and could use those reactions along with their own perceptions to make use of it. And he also said, art is not simply entertaining or decorative, it has a psychological utility for its maker and for readers and viewers too. This, of course, is Carl Schwab's The Ticket Tape, which was painted after he had a very rough health year in 1985 and kind of a near-death experience. Not decorative, certainly, but it allows us to sort of contemplate his state of mind at the time and what things might have been like for him and for us. Brink also said something else. He said, artists seldom provide the necessary keys to understanding their work because they don't have them. Why don't they have them? Because they're subconscious. This is the quilt that Dottie Moore created entitled Dreams, and when I pointed out what I thought was self-evident, I said, oh, that's a bed there. She said, I had no idea. You're right, it is a bed. I never realized that before. So Brink says, these artists are not going to tell us what these things mean or make these, because they're subconscious. But he said, but that should not deter us. We shouldn't refuse to engage with a piece just because the artist can't give us more information about why it happened. And then he takes it a step further and he says, the arts are not a precious enclave for aesthetes, but a gathering and correcting space for all. And this is Carl Schwab's painting that he did late in his life called The Big Canvas, which I remember several of you suggesting that the big canvas might be life itself. And here we see Carl in two roles. First of all, he's the painter. He's created an image for people to look at. People of all ages are looking at it. And Carl is looking at them, sort of observing their reaction. And it also reminded me, this quote also reminded me of Carl's frustration and impatience with the art critics who interviewed him, and were only really interested in telling him how he fit into the canon of art history. And it left him out of his own pictures entirely, even when they were self-portraits and contained him. They managed to exclude him from their analysis. They also, he felt, because of their sort of self-referential, snobby nature, left out everyone else too. And obviously, that's not what Carl wanted to do. You can see from this painting especially that he wanted it to be accessible to all kinds of people, even the very young, and even those who didn't have a PhD in art history. And the final quote that I will share with you of Brink's is that poetic imagination is undoubtedly part of a psychobiological self-regulation system. And I was reminded of Robin Nichols, the reason that she said that she had created all of these natural elements so that she could keep something with her that she no longer had the same access to as she did when she was a little girl. So this is I think, a very different perception of the place of art and the purpose of art in culture than most of us that our dominant culture typically has it. Again, to summarize it, a retrieval system for calling back and making sense of experience or feeling, a self-writing system, a gathering and correcting space. And so I got to thinking, well, this sort of validated what I'd sort of been stumbling along and coming up with in my own experience and in the experience of artists. I mean, the artist said this is helping us be better artists. I, in fact, after writing a novel about, or starting to write a novel about the White Horse Ranch with a autobiographical protagonist, and reading that piece aloud to some people, they said, that guy is Lincoln, that your protagonist, he's in kind of tough shape, he's really not making some very good life decisions. He seems to be alone and isolated and depressed. And I said, absolutely, you're right. And then I went back and started thinking about Lincoln and how similar Lincoln and I were, and I thought, I could probably make some different decisions and be happier and more functional, and I did. And it had a dramatic effect on my life. So I thought, if creative work and a dialogue between the creator and people who view his work, who need not, and in fact probably should not be art specialists, can have these dramatic effects, and probably historically have, is there a way that we can restart this use of art? Can I find a way to condense what happens in a 3-day interview with an artist into an experience that is of more accessible length and will help catalyze these kinds of insights on the part of both the people that are looking at the work and the creator? So I spent 20 years doing that. I started with what we've learned in the past 3 sessions, as we've looked over things, that life comes before the art. The patterns in life invariably show up in our work. We're almost always unconscious of those patterns and of the fact that they show up in what we do, whether we're making canoes or paintings. And that my experience in raising these patterns to the consciousness of the artists, they welcomed it, they were excited by it, they were energized by it, they felt like it was an act of self-discovery that would allow them to use those patterns consciously in their future work, rather than sort of stumbling on them as accidents. So there's the performance enhancement part that the sports psychologists have talked about. Don't dismiss those things. Just because they're unconscious or you don't know how you did them, doesn't mean you can't learn to do them again. And in my case, it wasn't just a professional benefit, it was a personal benefit. So I came up with this, I ended up hooking up with an outfit called the Center for Creative Leadership, which is based in Greensboro, but has offices in Brussels and elsewhere in Europe and in this country. And they're an international executive training organization. They run very, very expensive week-long training sessions where, with titles such as Leading Creatively and Leadership Development, where they teach very, very high-level people how to access skills they didn't know they had in order to meet challenges that nobody had faced before. Back in 15 years ago, their sessions cost $7,000 a week, plus lodging and food and everything else, and now I'm sure they're even more. And so I was talking to, I was sent by my employer to one of these leadership sessions, and I started talking to some of these people there, and I said, well, I've discovered some of these things, and they said, would you come back and demonstrate this for us? And so I did, and they said, we'd like to work with you and use this as one of our programs. And so for 6 months, we did a whole bunch of demonstrations and sort of refined the method. And then there was the Great Recession, and so they said, we got to pay off our endowment, our debt, and not as many companies are paying us big money to do this anymore. We'd really like to develop more programs, but we've just got to focus on the ones that we've already developed. And so they gave me, they had signed a non-compete, non-disclosure agreement, so they pretty much had no choice. They gave me all of the results of our collaboration, and as a result, I've had this sort of in my back pocket ever since. And I thought I had a very busy freelancing practice, so I really didn't have time to develop it. But now I'm really interested in seeing how how this exercise might be applied. And it's typically only used with about 8 or 10 people and one person who has created something. And we go through about an hour and a half long exercise of responding in a very particular way to the things the creator has brought. And then we sort of look for patterns, and then we see if those patterns can be applied to challenges that the creator has. And I've done this dozens of times. We don't have that amount of time here, and we have far too many people to do what I normally do, but I'd like to give you a taste of it, because I'd like to see, I've done this with professionals, I've done this with students, but I've never done this with a general audience like this, and I'm just curious to see, if you're willing to bear with me, if this is interesting, it seems to be interesting. So, we're going to do a sort of condensed version of this. How much time do we have before the break?
10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay. So we're going to get started on this in the first 10 minutes, and then we'll finish it up after break. But first, I've got to tell you the rules. The rules are, I'm going to show you 3 images of 3 things that a single person has created, one at a time. I'm going to ask you to just sort of shout out descriptive reactions, just very, very simple things that come to mind when you see these things. No analysis, no judgment, no evaluation, no explanation, just if you see something that's blue or short or curved or fuzzy, just say blue or short or curved or fuzzy without any attempt to explain what it is. I'm not going to give you any background on any of this information because I want these reactions to be as simple and pure as they come. And so then we'll look at all 3 of these things, and I need a couple of volunteers who are volunteer scribes who have quick, clear handwriting and are willing to write down some of these reactions on the paper back here. All right, we've got 1, we've got 2. Thank you very much. We've got 3, excellent. So we have 4, let's start with the first 3 panels there. And my lovely assistant will hand you markers. Yeah. Okay, so let's get started. Here is the first thing this person has named.
Fence.
I'm sorry?
A fence.
A fence, okay?
Water.
Railroad track. Reflection.
Okay, I'm gonna slow us down just a bit so that these poor folks can,
Are we all right? We're writing all of these.
well, yeah,
You want them on, this one on one page.
we different ones on different pages.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I haven't been clear. So we had railroad tracks, water,
Fence.
fence, yep, got that?
Bridge. So,
Bridge.
No, I
no,
think
you wait till the second one and you wait till the third one.
Sorry.
Okay.
As I say, I haven't done it this way before. I'm trying to condense an hour and a half into 10 minutes here.
Bridge.
Bridge, okay?
Reflection.
Reflection,
Scrolling. What?
reflection,
Oh, I'm sorry.
swirling,
She's
Frog.
he's going to present other images.
that's fine. They're doing fine. They're doing fine.
Well,
Okay.
it's just one.
Yeah,
Yeah, more green.
yeah. I'm sorry?
Green.
Green.
Movement.
Movement. I'm ready to catch another one.
Frogs.
Frogs.
Blurry.
Blurry.
Mix.
Frogs. Skull.
I didn't hear it.
Skull.
Rocks.
Well, something's in the water. Horse.
Yeah, I see that as a soul.
Anything else?
Skull. Something. Skull.
Skull.
Stone.
Stone.
Horse.
This is why we usually do it in a small room. Okay. That sounds good. We got another 5 minutes, right? For break? Okay, I'm going to move on to the second piece, okay? And this is a poem, so you're welcome to read it, but I'm also going to read it aloud, just so that I make sure everyone hears it. It's called Old Lovers. Old lovers flutter like laundry on the clothesline. Some remain comfortable friends, others surprisingly stiff and unyielding. Reflection blows the knowledge that some were only aired passions, brushes between textures. Wind entangled familiarity of arms, legs, entities, held fast by the pins of circumstance. Others demanded conditions that could never be, worn well, still loved, but pushed away by the winds of change. Old lovers flutter like laundry in the clothesline. Reactions, descriptive reactions,
Reflective.
reflective,
Memories.
Disappointment.
Changeability.
changeability,
Images and words.
images and words,
Age.
age,
Loss.
loss,
Regret.
regret,
Coming to terms.
coming to terms,
Seasons.
seasons,
Differences.
differences, transience,
Movement.
movement,
Rejection. Life.
life. Okay, let's take a break. We'll come and look at one more piece after the break. Continue.
Ladies and gentlemen, good to have you back in here. You'll notice that that you have the suggestion sheets on your chairs this morning. And if you can remember back to the previous classes that Dan had, we'd appreciate your comments, suggestions, anything that you would like to write on that. And you can leave it on the table in the hallway when you leave. And now for the second half of Dan's last class on creativity, a lifelong journey. Dan?
Okay, well, thanks. Everybody's been really forthcoming with reactions, and that's wonderful. We have one more piece to look at, and then we'll go on from there. So here is the final piece that we would like to get reactions from. Same kinds of very descriptive. You did great. Very short words and words and short phrases.
Fish. Button.
Texture. Blue.
Mushroom.
You said ribbon.
Roller skating.
Very.
Airy.
Airy, I'm sorry, airy.
Mask.
Eyes.
Mask.
Out of water.
Eyes,
Eyes.
out of water,
Ethereal.
ethereal. It's spelled
Go for it, Betty.
ethereal.
Ascending.
Ascending.
Scary.
Sad.
Sad. S-A-D, sad.
Playful.
Playful. Playful. Tooth. T-O-O-T-H. It's not our job to question. Stitches. Fins, F-I-N-S. Dimension.
Wordless.
Kite.
Pardon?
Kite, K-I-T-E, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm only an editor, not a proofreader.
Algae.
Algae. G-O-L-D.
Graceful.
Graceful.
M-O-L-D, mold. M.
Mold, M-O-L-D. Gold and mold. My head is old, my teeth are gold, I have a bird I like to hold. And now my story is all told. Dr. Seuss. Anything else? Okay, now I would like us to consider all three of these together. Okay? So now we're just going to, we only need one scribe for this. And I would like you to consider, of the words or phrases that I've written down there, or new ones that occur to you, what patterns or themes do you see? What words could apply to all three of these pieces?
Movement.
Movement, okay?
Blue, yeah. Freedom.
Reflection.
Reflection, okay? Move.
Move, or action. Move, oh, action. Action. They're all moving.
That's,
Anything else? We could go through some of these words that we've already said, and somebody stop me with a scream or something when I read something that you think applies to all three. We have fence. Well, I don't know whether I can read it from here. Water, bridge, reflection, swirling. Somebody said yes with reflection? Okay, that's already there. Okay, sorry. Movement we already have. Changeability, law, see, I'm going to have to come over here. I'm getting really old, or else this is messing up my glasses here. Texture, ascending, gold, reflection, we have movement, blurry, stone, memories, images and words, regret. Images, okay. We can put images down. Differences, rejection, mushroom, airy. Airy, we got another vote for airy, A-R-I-Y. A-I-Y. Out of water, scary, playful, dimension, kite, graceful. Graceful, all right. Swirling. We got a vote for swirling. Frogs. Disappointment. Age. Coming to terms. Transience. Transience, okay. Life. We got a vote for life. Button, ribbon, mask, ethereal. Vote for ethereal. Sad, tooth, fins, algae, and mold. So, in your view, looking at these three pieces, and sort of, and I'll just read aloud because it's hard to see. It's hard to see all of the things that we sort of thought might apply to all three of them. But those things were movement, blue, freedom, reflection, mood, action, images, airy, graceful, swirling, transience, life, and ethereal. How do people feel about that? I mean, do you feel like those, as you look at the three of them, did most of those words resonate and make sense? Is there evidence that these three things, what else do you see that these things have in common? Do they seem to be made by the same creator? No. They look very, okay, what differences do you see? The media are different, okay? And we have a painting, a sculpture, and a poem. Typically, when I ask creators to do these things, I say bring in things that are as different as possible from each other. Use different media, different subjects, different, anything different that you can think of. Bring in something different. Okay, sorry.
No, we were just wondering, I thought that the fish was a picture.
Oh.
This one up in the corner.
Okay, yeah. No, that fish is actually a sculpture made out of screen and paint and stitched together. That is a three-dimensional object. I'm sorry, I should have figured out a way to show that. Baby fish, somebody said.
I said, baby fish, it's like finding Elmo. Yes.
Okay, it's a cartoon fish, kind of a cartoon fish. Okay, all right, yeah. What else do you see going on here? Do you see any other relation between these three things?
They all evoke emotion.
They all evoke emotion. Okay. Yes.
Movement in all of them, kind of fluttery.
Fluttery movement. Flowing, fluttery sort of movement. Okay. Anything else?
Surprise?
Elaborate a little bit.
Well, I just think, if you saw that whole picture, you would be surprised by what this tiny little bit, how it fits in.
Uh-huh.
The fish looks, well, we were surprised because it wasn't flat.
Uh-huh.
And then they're surprising where,
The fence is upside down. Bothers me.
The comment was that the fence is upside down and it bothers me. Okay, all right. Well, this is the time. In a real self-portrait session, these things would all be in front of us. We could be able to walk around them and see them and touch them and handle them. So we would have a much more direct experience with them. And at this point in the self-portrait session, I would ask the creator if any of these particular things had any resonance, if they seem to make sense or seem to reveal something. And so, as I said, we do this in a small group for a reason. This is a very sort of self-disclosing kind of exercise. So the creator was a volunteer who was among us, and if he or she is willing to reveal his or herself, we'd be happy to get my wife Randy, who is not an artist, she's a science teacher, but she created these things over time. Do any of these things seem to be resonant to you? Do they make any sense to you?
When my poetry was published, they asked me where it came from. And I said, poetry just exudes from things like running. And I scribbled it down. So did I know where it came from? No. When these were published, I was asked by the editor where these came from. I have one that's called My First Beer with John, Ode to a Wine Bottle, She Knits, and this one, Old Lovers. And they said, where does this come from? And I said, poetry just exudes from things like running. and I just scribbled it down. So did I know where it came from? No.
What about the reactions? Did any of these things surprise you, or did any of them resonate? Did any of them seem to
When
make
Dan
sense?
and I were looking at these, and I volunteered, I saw several of these things that because I had never put all the three together. I wrote the poem a very long time ago, and these were done a couple summers ago. I was the only scientist in an art class, and the art teacher said, do you have a hobby? And I said, yes, I knit. She goes, could you bring your knitting tomorrow? Because I finished all my things, like in an hour or two, and the artists were all like, should it be this color blue or that? And I'm like, nah, this looks good. I like it just the way it is. So I was a little rebellious there. But when I looked at them, I saw movement, I saw the reflection, definitely airy, the clothesline blowing, the water moving, and this is not upside down. This is at Gervanais in France, at Monet's garden, and this is the bridge. And these are, I'm sorry, remember I'm a science person, these are lily pad.
But anyway, so what
Yes.
did you find this? Did you find that you learned something about yourself or about the themes behind these things as a result of looking at all three of them together?
Well, we can still stay married.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yes. No, I think when it first hit me was when you and I did it together,
Mhm.
because I had never looked at them all together.
Mhm.
And I came up with a lot of the same things that you all did as I looked at them, because I had never reflected on them other than, this is fun, I'll hang that in my classroom, and all my students wanted to take that home, and I never, of course, showed my students the top one, so.
But the point is that there are things that you can learn about yourself or about somebody, and it doesn't have to be in a sort of formal setting, but the more, if you look at a series of things that come from one person and you can start identifying, oh, these things occur more than once, what might be the significance of that? Of these things have been done over the time. Does there seem to be a progression? Does there seem to be a direction? Are these themes that are coming out of my work things that apply to other aspects of my life? Are there, does movement or freedom or reflection or flowing, swirling, are these things that characterize who I am or who I want to be? Yes?
Is there one word that comes out of that poem, Old Lovers, that sticks out? The one word for me is flutter.
Really?
Flutter, because how do you put lines around flutter? You can't, because it's creative. It's movement.
The comment was the one word that sort of jumped out was flutter, because it's sort of undefinable. It's movement. It continually changes, and so how do you track that sense? How do you make it firm?
And these are reflective of different stages of my life. Being alone, on my honeymoon, being in art class, where they said, you have no talent. I'm like, okay, I'll just do what I want.
So thank you very much for being willing to, yeah, you can do that. Thank you, Josie. So in the few minutes that we have left, I'd just like to sort of reflect back on the things that we've learned, the things that the artists have taught us, the questions that we've engaged. And I want to come back to Brink, Andrew Brink again. Also, so what is art for? The title of the course implies that it's a lifelong journey, both for creators and for audiences. It's something that keeps going on as life keeps going on. It doesn't. They're individual pieces that fix a moment or a particular means of expression, but they're sort of like snapshots in the life. And art sort of runs through our culture and runs through our life and sort of never stops. As Brink said, and his assertions seem to be brought out in my conversations with artists and in my own experience and in the observations that you all have had here, that art is a way to process life experience. The life comes before the art. and to bring it out and to make it something that can be perceived and engaged with and dialogued with. It also is an opportunity to share them communally. I always have said that the best form of publishing is doing what we're doing here, is doing what I'm doing now, is talking to people, because I've written for magazines with readerships of 20 million people, and we might get a letter or two about something that I've published. So you get very, very little feedback in television, in movies, and so on and so forth. But you get lots of feedback, and it's much more gratifying, and I learn much more from talking to people and hearing their response than I do from writing something and putting it out there. And I think that is the way art started. I mean, the original form of publishing was storytelling, and the original form of fine art was the things that people did to their own living spaces, and the things that they wore, and the things that they made and carried with them. That's something that we don't do as much. It's become much more specialized, and I think that's too bad, and I think it's counterproductive to the original evolutionary purpose of art. It offers us a chance to gain a communal perspective, and generally, when we put 75 or 100 brains on a subject, we'll get more data. I mean, there's just more sensors. I mean, in strictly objective terms, there are more sensors, there are more processors, and there's more data. So we have more that we can evaluate and more that we can learn from. As Brink says, it's a method of individual and communal growth. It is a space where people can come together and process experience and try out ideas and try out interpretations of experience that is, helps us thrive. There seem to be some, he said the artists, don't look to the artists for keys to understanding, because it's not that they want to keep them from you, they don't have them, they're not accessible to them. In fact, it's your job to help make those keys accessible to the creator. And that's why I think a descriptive reaction is very important, because an analytical reaction really offers there's a whole bunch of decisions that have been made in order to create analysis before it's spoken. But a descriptive reaction, you're getting the raw data. So a bunch of people can sort of say, oh, okay, that makes sense, or doesn't make sense, or what do you mean by that? And it can get refined in a communal process, which I think is much more powerful than an individual process. There are ways to use this sort of approach to art all the time, and we don't have to do it in a course like that. I mean, you can just look at pieces and offer, or think to yourself, how would I describe this in the absolute simplest of terms? Well, what am I looking at here? Let's not be too clever. Let's just what I found particularly powerful is having a dialogue in which the creator can choose which elements are resonant and say, oh, okay, that makes sense. And boy, I hadn't thought about it that way. Because then you have a connection between the audience and the creator providing something, and when both agree, there's usually something there. When it's only one or the other, there's less of a chance of being, it's almost mathematical, there's less of a chance of it being correct than when more than one see it. And that the patterns and themes that tend to appear in all of somebody's work, or in a great deal of it, tend to be more important, oftentimes, than the nominal subject. Oftentimes, you can have several paintings of several different subjects, but the themes are the same, and the themes, according to the artists that I've talked to and the reactions that I get from them, are what's really important. Okay, this is something that goes through everything that I do. It's constantly on my mind. It's a big part of my experience. There must be something there worthy of exploring. And these patterns and themes are often almost universally subconscious. I mean, they're things that like our handwriting, they sort of choose us to express them rather than the other way around. And they come by themselves. I mean, you can't obscure these things no matter how hard you try. And that's where the meaning is. And that's where things really come together. So I think we have a couple more minutes left. Do we have 10 minutes or something? I'm sorry?
20.
Oh, we got lots of time. So at this point, sort of reflecting back over the whole experience, does anybody have any questions, or observations, or things they'd like to talk about? Yeah.
One of the things that I was thinking of, the current exhibit at the college is called Start by Asking Questions. And I won't go into, you can think about what that might imply to you.
Right.
But the other part of that is, and the art critic from the New York Times came and gave a talk about how we go into a museum and we stop trying to read everything about what that picture says. And that's not what she said. You look at it, and what do you bring to it? What are
Right.
your questions? So there were two little short things that I attended, not by art people in the art department, but by others who picked a painting or a piece of work or a sculpture that intrigued them and then came and talked about it. They were 20-minute short courses, and then other people, what did you see? So it's a way of, what you're bringing here, that we're so concerned about getting it right, rather than thinking of what does it mean to us and seeing a pattern in an artist's work.
Okay, so
Just want to comment, a lengthy one, but.
to try and paraphrase this and make sure everybody hears it, there's an exhibit at the college called Start by Asking Questions. And it was pointed out that people typically rush right up to the car. I'm guilty of this, and my excuse is I'm a writer. Well, I have to, but that's not the point. People want to see what the expert, what the right answer is, so that they can go back and say, yes, of course, I knew that. I can see that that's the case. That's not right. That's reductive. It's taking one person's point of view and shaping an interpretation around it when the number of possible interpretations is almost infinite and the results are much richer. So it seems like there's a correspondence between sort of the message of that presentation and the kinds of things that we've been talking about here. Yeah. Yes?
You spoke of the subconscious reflecting itself in the work of art.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see evidence of evolution of that subconscious over time with a given artist?
That's a very, very good question. The question was, have I seen evolution of the subconscious of a given artist over a period of time? That's not one I'm really well equipped to answer because I typically would interview them once. And so I would always look at earlier work and later work to the extent that I could, but I didn't have an ongoing dialogue with them as I would like to. However, in works of literature, having studied writing, I've studied several writers over the course of their career, in particular John McPhee, who's a New Yorker profile writer who sort of inspired me to get into writing to begin with. And I found that I found it very difficult to learn from him by reading his later work, but if I read his very, very early stuff, which wasn't as good, I could see, okay, here's where he started from, here's what he did, here's what he is, and then reading, you can see how he's evolved his style, he's evolved his technique, and he's learned. And I'm sure that's the case in other artists as well. There was only one artist that I typically had very congenial and productive interviews with artists. And they were all very, they all really enjoyed them. I really enjoyed them. In fact, I got done with one that lasted 6 hours. It happened in my office. And I interviewed this musician, Deborah Henson-Conant. She's a jazz harpist. And when I put down the phone after 6 hours, my colleague in the next cubicle said, "That wasn't an interview, that was a date." Because we both had a lot of fun, and that's typically the way it went with all ours. There was only one I had that was frustrating, and that, oddly enough, was with Madeleine L'Engle, the writer, highly esteemed. And so I had to read her, I had to read some of her, I read Wrinkle in Time a long time ago, but I reread A Wrinkle in Time, and I read one of her later books. And I started asking her the kinds of questions during the interview, and I was sort of frustrated because it seemed to me like she told the same story over and over again. Like, her stories are brilliant, but they sort of all start and end in the same place, and they all have sort of the same structure to them. And so I was asking the question, and I always ask a series of questions. I ask about their background, because the art comes before the life, their education or their training. Life comes before the art, so their background, and then their education or their training, and then their evolution. How have they, has their work changed over time, or their trajectory, as I sometimes call it. And then I ask them to sort of project into the future. What's changing? Where are you going next? What do you see as your next thing? And she was very frustrated by these questions. She got really quite defensive by them, and I didn't mean them defensively at all, but I think she was the only artist that I personally talked to, and as I say, I admire her greatly. I think her work is wonderful, but for some reason, there didn't seem to be the flow in her work or progression that I had seen in other people, but in most others, yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Very good question. Anything else? Yes?
One of the things that just amazes me about art is being able to see or hear something from a different perspective. And just as a case in point, the picture that you showed of the bed,
Yes.
I did not see the bed when you first displayed that. Even today, when I saw that picture, I did not see the bed.
Yes, yes.
I see a keyhole
Uh-huh.
through which you are viewing life.
Uh-huh.
And you almost took me back, that it was jarring to me to try to see that from the other perspective.
Yeah, it's like those, it's, the comment was that the amazing thing about art is to being able to see things from different perspectives. And of course, we all know the drawings that can be seen as, you know, a young girl or an old woman, or a chalice or two faces looking at one another, and so on and so forth. And that's part of, in my view, our adaptive, evolved consciousness, is that we can see things in more than one perspective, and that as individuals, we will see things differently from other people, and those things, all of those things have value, and all of those things combined create a richer understanding than any one of them in particular does. Yeah. Yeah. Yes?
I see that painting more as a road leading to opening with
To an arch, yeah, yeah. The same, she sees that same quilt as a road leading through an archway. So we have a keyhole, a bed, a road through an archway, all of which are perfectly valid interpretations. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else? Yes.
Tilly Woodward, is, you know her.
Yes.
Is the community liaison for Faulkner Gallery, and we talked to her about this, start by asking questions, and she has had a lot of children tour through there, and it's really interesting to see what the children see, because they haven't even been told what it's all about. They
Right.
just bring them in there and see it, and that's an amazing thing.
Yes. Well, they are like the self-taught artists, or like Galen Carpenter, who said, you know, I was right off the turnip truck, and I didn't know that I had to do all of these things. And yeah, I mean, I think Brink would say, Andrew Brink would say, that the whole process, the whole specialized process that we have for the whole art industry, if we put it that way, or the whole, has become very, very specialized and very, very restricted. Compared to what it could be, and that in fact we've done what we've done to Iowa's wonderful streams. We've dug ditches and put things in specific places, in specific slots, rather than, you know, sort of letting them flow and see where they go, and getting more perspectives on things. Yes.
When we were going through my art and people were coming up with some of these things, I'm thinking, but apparently something in their background allowed them to see something different than I intended it to be. So as they were going through this, I'm thinking, really? You know, wow, I didn't know.
The comment was from the creator that the audience saw very, very different things in what Randy had done than Randy had intended, and she said, "Wow, this is completely new to me. It's not what I intended, but their background informs what it is that they see." And in a real self-portrait, I'll get to you just in a real self-portrait, we ask, there's a section in which the creator gets asked for a definition of things, like, well, what did you mean by scary, or where did you get scary from, or where did you get playful from, or where did you get dimension from, and the audience has a chance to explain it a little bit better. So quite often that, then we come to a common understanding of what that term means, and we say, okay, that's it. But sometimes they are very different, yeah. Yeah.
We're talking about art primarily. However, as I look at this, and as I look at comment, or listen to the comments and so forth, I see the flow of life. It doesn't really matter what area of work we may have been in. What has been the progression? Where have we been? What are we moving to? The artist does that. We all do that with our lives. If life does not do that, then we're standing still and in fact not doing anything.
The comment was that art and life are in some ways synonymous in the purposes, for the purposes of our discussion, correct me if I'm paraphrasing it badly, and that creation is a sort of continuous process throughout life, and that if we're not creating, then we're standing still, we're not doing anything. And so this process is not relevant just to life. And it's also true, I mean, I've interviewed lots and lots of people, business people, crafts people, trades people, and they all have patterns in their work. The same as the creative people do. They all leave their personal thumbprint on their job. They all have the imposter syndrome, you know, if they've done something original, well, I'm not supposed to really, this isn't really my job description, and I'm not supposed to do it this way, but this is the way I do it, and I've always felt kind of guilty about it. It happens in every discipline. Engineers, truck drivers, they all have experiences like this. So this is not limited to, and that's why I didn't call it art a lifelong journey. I called it creativity a lifelong journey, because creativity is. I agree. I happen to agree with you. I think creativity is the process of living. Anything else? All right. Well, this has been great fun for me. I really appreciate you indulging me for 4 sessions and an unscheduled session afterwards. Thank you so much.
And we thank you so much, Dan. This has been a real treat for us. Appreciate you coming back to the makeup course too. Thank you. Remember to fill out your little comment sheets if you would like to, and leave them out on the table. Next week, we have a very informal get-together with Dr. J.R. Paulson, who has offered to come and discuss some of the points that he made in his recent course on why can't we all get along. So hope to see you here next week. It will not be videotaped. It'll just be informal and private. So please come back. For those of you who are not able to, our bucket courses will resume again on Wednesday, January 6th. So we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you for coming.